Some Mercedes models are the epitome of on-road luxury. Others are almost unrivalled for off-road prowess. And then there's one which claims to offer the best of both, the GL class. This is one of the very few super luxury SUVs that can seat 7 fully sized adults, and it's the only one that can do so whilst offering a properly dynamic drive on-road, as well as extreme capability off it. This second generation version is smarter, plusher, more refined, and even more appealing. Got a family? You'd like one. There was a time when the sun never set on the British Empire. Roll out a map from 1922 and the world is shaded pink. Australia, India, South Africa, Canada and many others. Fully a quarter of the Earth's land was British as part of the largest empire the world had ever known. Less than 100 years ago, this tiny island claimed dominion over 458 million people. Perhaps that's why there's so much hand-wringing and frustration sometimes when we see cars that probably aren't designed for us, like this Mercedes GL class. We think we matter more than we probably do. This, if you haven't yet come across it, is a vehicle billed as the S-Class of SUVs, a luxury conveyance for those whose real, or more likely imagined, commute to the real world is from a craggy mountaintop. We first saw it in 2007, built in America for Americans, and since then occupying super-sized shopping mall spaces from New York to New Orleans in ever-increasing numbers. Over there, it was a necessary addition to the brand's luxury SUV lineup, given that for Yanks, the 5-metre-long M-Class is pretty compact, and the exorbitantly priced G-Class is too crude for most. Something to take on the all-conquering Range Rover that would offer well-heeled buyers the added benefit of 7 seats. It's that third seating row that's always set the GL apart in a luxury 4x4 market that rarely offers this option, or if it does, often restricts practical use of the extra seats to children. Hence perhaps the bigger than expected take-up for this car in its first generation form on these shores. Ours being a market that most commentators thought would find this model a size or so too big. Though even larger in the guise we're going to look at here, the second generation design launched in mid-2013, greater familiarity with cars of this size means that it doesn't actually seem quite so huge these days. And the sleeker shape clothes a GL class that's cleverer and more comfortable, quieter and more efficient. Let's put it to the test. Not everyone is going to feel comfortable piloting something of this size, but provided you do, then GL class motoring is a pretty fabulous way to view your everyday world. The great all-round visibility you get from your lofty perch behind the wheel makes manoeuvrability a lot more straightforward than you might expect, and in any case, other road users tend to scatter as you bear down upon them. There are, in theory, 2 models on offer, but given that one of them, the GL63 AMG, has a thirsty 5.5 litre petrol V8 installed up front, in practice, almost all sales will be of the GL350 Blue Tech diesel variant that I'm trying here. This, apparently, is Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton's company car, but presumably he has one because he wants something completely opposite to the kind of thing he'd drive in his day job. This GL class fits that brief perfectly, as to be fair you'd expect given its sheer bulk and 2.5 ton weight. To try and help matters, Mercedes has specified its Airmatic air suspension system with ADS adaptive damping, a standard on all UK models, enabling the ride quality to be varied between comfort or sport modes. If you're someone likely to be using the firmer of those 2 options on a regular basis, then you'd do well to also specify the optional active curve system that I have here. This is a setup that uses active stabilisers on the front and rear axles to restrict body roll through the corners and offer a sharper response from the variable ratio steering. The effect is astonishing if you're on a twisting secondary road and running late for the school play or something. The only eventuality in which I can imagine anyone wanting to throw a car of this size around. Enough to make this GL class as responsive as a Porsche Cayenne or a BMW X5 to drive? No. But then these are smaller, 5-seat only luxury SUVs that Mercedes more closely targets with its slightly more compact M-Class model. They're also nothing like as good as this model off-road. It's still got a car-like monocoque body, so it won't be as clunky as something like a Toyota Land Cruiser V8 or Mercedes' much cruder G-Class Geländewagen. But within the confines of that design approach, a GL really can be very capable off the beaten track. It's got permanent four-wheel drive, of course, an intelligent 4MATIC system with a 50-50 torque split front to rear and a 4ETS electronic traction control setup that includes an off-road button that you press to activate a special off-road driving program. Once you do, the slip threshold of the wheels, the throttle sensitivity, ABS and ESP intervention, and the change points of the 7G-tronic Plus 7-speed auto transmission are all tweaked for off-piste use. You also get hill start assist to help you start off up steep slopes. You can then more easily descend from using a downhill speed regulator that'll ease you to the bottom. All of that will be quite sufficient for the needs of most likely buyers. But for those who do intend to drive off-road regularly, Mercedes offers the extra cost on and off-road package that I have fitted here. Select it via this rotary switch on the center console and you can choose between no fewer than 6 different driving programs. 3 for on-road, that's for trailer, snow and sport, and 2 for off-road. To suit either easy or difficult trails, that's off-road 1 or off-road 2, and there's an automatic setting for when you can't be bothered to decide. More importantly, this package gives you the proper low-range gearbox and differential lock that standard GLs lack, along with underbody protection and a raise in ride height from 216 to 306 millimeters to try and ensure that you won't get stuck in the first place. That height increase will allow you to wade through water up to 600 millimeters deep too. For the ups and downs of off-road living, there's a 20-degree breakover angle, a 30-degree approach angle, and a not quite so impressive 25-degree departure angle. There are special off-road lights to illuminate your way at speeds of up to 31 miles an hour, and axle articulation is superb even without the differentials locked. The electronics then provide power so that if necessary you can drive along with 2 wheels airborne. And no, I'm not going to demonstrate that. It all sounds impressive, but of course what really matters is the way that this car performs on tarmac. The quoted 4.9 second 0 to 62 mile an hour sprint time of the 557 brake horsepower GL63 AMG petrol V8 model sounds faintly frightening, but now there's even more reason not to choose it, given that thanks mainly to a 90 kilogram weight saving, this 258 brake horsepower GL350 BlueTech diesel is significantly quicker than its predecessor. A potent 620 newton meters of torque from the 3-litre V6 up front means that the 62 mile an hour sprint is dispatched in just 7.9 seconds as a 7-speed gearbox elegantly slurs you on towards a 137 mile an hour maximum. The all-important 30 to 70 mile an hour overtaking increment occupies just 8 seconds. So yes, this car can really move when it needs to. What's most astonishing, though, is the sheer silence that accompanies such relatively rapid progress as you cruise along on pillows of airmatic air. Mercedes reckons that thanks to the sleeker shape, an acoustic windscreen and minutely detailed NVH engineering, cabin refinement now rivals that of their S-Class limousine, which is astonishing for something so big and boxy. Certainly, if there's a quieter luxury SUV on the market than this, then I haven't driven it. So it's big. Of course it is. even more so than the car it replaces, which already was large enough to make your neighbours question their right to light restrictions. This Mark II model is longer, wider and taller, with more than 3 metres between its wheels and a total length of nearly 5.2 metres. So you'll need a very large garage. Having said all that, this is a design that's remarkably effective in concealing its bulk, thanks to sleeker looks and well-balanced proportions, with short body overhangs at the front and rear suggestive of off-road prowess. As before, there's a car-like monocoque construction under the skin that's now lighter than previously, thanks to the use of aluminium in the bonnet and the wings, despite which this car is still heavier than a rival Range Rover. The front is dominated by an upright radiator grille with a centrally mounted 3-pointed star and jewel-like high-tech headlamps, showcasing the cleverness of the brand's intelligent light system. Follow the rising belt lines to the rear, admiring the 21-inch 5-spoke AMG alloys and the aluminium running boards as you go, and you might notice this neat small kink near the C-pillar, one of the things that makes the rear seem a little less bulky. At the back, you'll find 2-piece LED tail lamps, a large roof spoiler, a bumper with a modern wing design, and an underbody panel with extensive areas of chrome. Right, onto the interior, and I'm going to start with the thing that sets this car apart in its segment, the space you'll find at the very back. The fact that it has 3 seating rows at all is fairly unusual in the super luxury SUV sector, setting this car apart from, say, the Range Rover or the Porsche Cayenne. And the fact that in that third row, 2 fully sized adults can be properly accommodated is even more unusual, setting this car apart from slightly smaller rivals like the Range Rover Sport or the Audi Q7. Let me show you. The wide opening doors ensure easy access, and because Mercedes' easy entry system now allows both left and right sides of the second row seating to completely shift forwards, access to the very back is easy, particularly if you've specified the motorised easy entry package that I'm using here. Once installed back here, there's quite as much space as you'd find in any large MPV. Now, if you've owned a GL class before or used one, then you'll know that 2 big burly folk could also fit into the rearmost row of the original version of this car. But you'll also know that they would have struggled for comfort on a longer trip. Thanks to the extra 9mm of headroom and the extra 19mm of elbow room provided in this second generation design, that's no longer such an issue. Alright, but what about the middle seat? That, after all, is the part of the car that you're going to be using most often. So let's get the easy entry system working, put the seats back and see how you'd fare actually sat in the centre part of the vehicle. Now, once you do get installed here, you'll find that there's comfortable room for 3 adults. And you also get improvements in head and elbow room over the previous generation version of this car. Plus, the seats can actually recline for greater comfort on longer journeys. And up front, well, it's pretty much exactly as you'll find in Mercedes' M-Class luxury SUV, which means that, though very nice indeed, the whole ambience isn't quite as glamorous as that of a Range Rover or a Porsche Cayenne. Still, the brushed aluminium trim is nice, and you'll find the stitched Artico artificial leather actually looks quite good too, if you're not prepared to push the boat out and pay loads extra for the Designo Napa leather trim package that I've got here. Through the 4-spoke leather-trimmed multifunction steering wheel, you view 2 clear round dials separated by a 4.8-inch colour display, while in the centre of the dash there's the usual large colour display screen for the command infotainment system, operable by this rotary controller positioned where the handbrake would be if it hadn't been replaced by one of those fiddly under dashboard catches. That leaves luggage space. Lift the huge tailgate and there's actually a reasonable amount, 295 litres, even when you've got all 7 seats upright. Plus you've got this useful underfloor compartment. Use the neat electric folding system to flatten the third row into the floor, and that figure increases to 680 litres, pretty much the same as you get in an M-Class. Flatten the second row as well though, and you'll find that this GL has much more space than its Mercedes stablemate. There's a massive 2,300 litres, that's about 15% more space than you get in, say, a Range Rover or an Audi Q7. Buying a GL class is pretty straightforward. Though there's a wild V8 petrol GL63 AMG model requiring an £85,000 budget, almost all customers will want the single, more sensible variant that I'm trying here, the GL350 BlueTech Diesel, for which you'll need around £60,000. It's a car that comes fully kitted out in UK guise, but as we'll see, that doesn't mean that there isn't plenty of scope to get creative if you've the budget to do it. Before we get into that, you'll be wanting to know where this car sits in the luxury SUV market. First, perhaps, within the context of the Mercedes range itself. After all, the brand isn't exactly short of large, plush SUVs in its lineup. For around £10,000 less than the sticker price on this diesel GL, you can have the same 350 BlueTech engine, but slightly less space and off-road prowess, in a Merc ML350. Or if you really want to be tough in the rough and can find another £25,000 more than is required for this GL, then Mercedes' rare but very capable G-Class, the so-called Geländewagen, could be yours with a detuned 211 brake horsepower version of this same engine. But it's far less suited to the tarmac. Perhaps the most telling fact, though, for potential customers is that of these 3 vehicles, it's only this GL class model that can offer 7 seats. If that's a crucial factor in your decision, and given that over 2/3 of GL class buyers have children, it probably will be, then there aren't too many other options in this part of the market. Certainly not a Range Rover, which is 5-seat only and in comparable TDV6 form costs around £12,000 more. Perhaps the closest proper alternative in terms of size is Toyota's Land Cruiser V8, but though very capable off-road, it's slower, more ponderous, less stylish, and £5,000 pricier. And of course it's a Toyota. The problem is, the only alternative to it is a large SUV that, well, isn't quite as large, so you won't be able to fit fully sized adults comfortably into the 3rd seating row. Now, if that's not an issue for you, then a comparable Audi Q7 3-litre TDI 245 PS would save you around £15,000 on this car, while a 7-seater Range Rover Sport TDV6 would save you around £7,000. Ultimately, though, there's nothing quite like a GL class, and if, having considered all of this, you've also come to that conclusion, then you're going to want to know what comes included in the standard spec. Quite a lot, actually. So, as well as a 7G-tronic Plus 7-speed automatic gearbox, variable ratio direct steering, and self-leveling airmatic suspension with adaptive damping, you get an exhaustive kit list. All UK GL class models come complete with AMG body styling for the front and rear aprons, side skirts and wheel arches, plus 21-inch AMG alloy wheels. There's an intelligent light system with auto-activating bi-xenon headlamps that dip themselves at night, compensate for bad weather and help you see around corners. There are also LED daytime running lights and even a special off-road light so that ideal illumination is provided in any circumstances. Additionally, you get roof rails, an electric glass sunroof, privacy glass, aluminium-trimmed LED-lit running boards, metallic paint, rain-sensing wipers, Artico artificial leather upholstery for the dashboard and the heated seats, a Napa leather-trimmed multifunction sports steering wheel, plus the Command online infotainment system that includes satellite navigation, a media interface and a DAB digital tuner. I also like the active park assist with parktronic system that not only gives you parking sensors, but it'll automatically steer you into the tightest spaces, having helped identify them for you in the first place. It's a pretty important feature to have on a car this large. As for safety, well, that's well catered for too. There's an active bonnet to reduce pedestrian injuries, Isofix child seat fastenings and 7 airbags, twin front, side and curtain, plus a driver's knee bag. And there's the option of rear seat side bags if you want them. You also get the pre-safe anticipatory safety system, which senses when a crash is inevitable and automatically positions the seats, the belts and even the sunroof in the best position to survive it. After any impact, the hazard lights will be switched on, the door locks disengaged, the side windows partially open to ventilate the interior, and the fuel system shut down. At the same time, the command infotainment system will automatically call the emergency services, alerting them to your exact location with a GPS signal. It's all been very thoroughly thought out. But of course, the main goal in safety design is to prevent an accident in the first place. So you get a whole raft of electronic aids. ESP stability control, of course, which is even cleverer than normal thanks to a unique load sensor, which calculates the weight of passengers and luggage on board and regulates the threshold at which ESP intervenes. Then there's 4 ETS electronic traction control, ASR acceleration skid control, GSR active yaw control, and an anti-lock braking system that'll keep your brake discs dry in the wet and prime them for emergency stops that'll be further assisted by adaptive brake assist and BAS brake assist. If you're towing, there's a trailer stability assist system, and there's also a hill start assist setup to help when you're starting off on uphill junctions. That'll also aid you off-road where there's a DSR downhill speed regulation to ease you down steep slopes. It doesn't end there. Fresh features introduced on this second generation GL class model include the fatigue detection system, attention assist. When you start off, this assesses your driving style, then continues to monitor it, alerting you if your reaction suggests that you need to stop for a restorative coffee. Then there's crosswind assist, there to keep the car stable should you be hit by a sudden side gust of wind, a welcome feature in a model this big and boxy. Steer control will help you with steering compensation when driving on surfaces with differing levels of grip on each side of the car, say if you're accelerating forward with one side of the car on a slippery grass verge, for instance. Then there's collision prevention assist, which at speeds of over 19 miles an hour scans the road ahead for potential collision hazards. If one is detected, the system will warn you. If you don't respond or aren't able to, braking will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. If for some reason this little lot isn't enough to make you feel completely bulletproof in your GL class, then you can pay extra for a driving assistance package that gives you active blind spot assist to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot, active lane keeping assist, that's to keep dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway, and Distronic Plus with pre-safe brake. That's a setup that via radar will automatically keep you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway, even braking for you if you suddenly hit a tailback and varying your speed down to 0, then off again without any driver intervention. Now, this car also has the pricey Night View Assist Plus system that enables you to better pick out accident hazards after dark. Personally though, before paying out for all of that, I'd want to prioritise the extra cost fitment of the active curve system for active roll stabilisation, a setup which dramatically reduces body roll through tight corners and makes a huge difference in something this big when you're pressing on around tight country lanes. It's standard on the top GL63 AMG petrol model, which also gets special AMG branded trim throughout, and of course, to cope with the extra power on offer, AMG engineering for the brakes, the exhaust and the transmission. What I wouldn't suggest you specify on a GL63 AMG is the extra cost on and off-road package that I have here, which gives you extra mud plugging driving modes and a raised ride height for rock crawling and wading. Heaven knows what that would do to that car's fancy twin 5-spoke AMG alloy wheels. Assuming you're looking at this GL350 BlueTech diesel though, there are a number of key options that could be tempting. Now here I've got the parking package, which gives you a clever 360-degree camera system so that you can see all round the car and even watch your progress from above. Proper leather upholstery is nice. So are the massaging multi-contour seats, and the kids would doubtless appreciate the rear seat entertainment system with its two integrated 8-inch screens, headphones and DVD player. And for me, as a final touch, I'd simply have to have the bespoke developed 14-speaker 1200 watt Bang & Olufsen Biosound AMG sound system with its concert hall clarity. Mercedes has put a lot of thought into trying to make this car more efficient. Greater use of aluminium, plastic and even magnesium alloy, enabling a weight reduction of up to 90 kilograms. There's an eco start-stop system built into the 7G-tronic Plus 7-speed auto gearbox to cut the engine when you don't need it, stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Plus, you get sleeker aerodynamics, electric power steering, low rolling resistance tyres, an adjustable radiator shutter and even front wheel spoilers all play their part. As a result, combined cycle fuel consumption and CO2 returns for this GL350 BlueTech diesel have improved by about 15% to 35.3 miles to the gallon and 209 grams per kilometre. Quite a change from the 29.1 miles to the gallon and 257 grams per kilometre achieved by the equivalent version of this car, the first generation GL, at its original launch. And the current GL's figures are way better than the 29.7 miles to the gallon and 250 grams per kilometre you get from, this car's only similarly sized rival, Toyota's Land Cruiser V8. It's true that comparable TD V6 Range Rover and Range Rover Sport models do slightly better than this Mercedes, but you don't get with them GL class interior space. And it's also worth pointing out that with the standard 100 litre fuel tank fitted, this particular GL class model, this diesel, can now travel over 800 miles between fill-ups. It's also very clean, meeting EU6 standards thanks to the adoption of Mercedes' selective catalytic reduction technology and the installation of what's called AdBlue injection. Now, AdBlue is an aqueous urea solution that's injected into the exhaust flow to increase ammonia. Now, this then transforms 80% of the vehicle's NOx emissions into harmless water and nitrogen in the catalytic converter. That just leaves the flagship petrol-powered GL63 AMG model to consider, a car that also gets a start-stop system and a controlled efficiency driving mode. Despite that, it's a model that was always going to accumulate plenty of Tiger tokens. Most owners will be lucky to replicate its quoted 23 miles to the gallon official combined cycle average. But emissions of 288 grams per kilometre are remarkable for a vehicle this big and heavy. Better indeed than you'd get from a less powerful supercharged 5-litre V8 Range Rover or Range Rover Sport. Good residual values will help soften the running cost blow when the time comes to sell up. And insurance groupings are set at 49 for this diesel and a top of the shop 50 for the GL63 AMG. There's nothing quite like a GL class, and if you're a wealthy American considering it against obvious US rivals like Cadillac's Escalade or a Lincoln Navigator, then buying this Mercedes must seem like a no-brainer. This side of the Atlantic, it's also a pretty simple choice, provided that you're in the unusual position of wanting a huge 7-seat super luxury SUV that can climb the lower slopes of Snowdon, then stop by Sainsbury's on the way to an evening at the Ritz. If a car that can do all that is somewhere on your wish list, then you won't be disappointed with this one. But then that much we already knew about this Mercedes. The thing that's changed with this second generation version is a broadening of its appeal. Now it reaches out below its price point to an Audi Q7 class customer and above its asking figure to a lower order Range Rover buyer. Now these people may not necessarily need this car's huge size or ultimate off-road prowess, but hey, they didn't really need a big SUV in the first place, so why not buy one that really ticks all the boxes? This GL class does, and in second generation form manages to do so with a far more dynamic personality. True, it's not quite the all-round proposition a Range Rover can be, but in many respects it offers far more car for much less money. Which means that in your SUV search for the biggest and the best, you shouldn't overlook it, even if you're British.